Well, the thing was that when I first started to play internationally, I think I'm right here, but you'd have to check the history on this. That there was a system of 1, 2 and 3 point players with 11 points on court. So that of course meant you couldn't have 5 3-point players who were people who had pretty good leg movement, which gives far better balance in the wheelchair sat down than it does if you've no muscles below your chest. But what was happening with that system, when I think that system was brought in 68, 69 or something like that, it was a medical control. I mean, I remember I was playing with the French for the French club. We were national champions 2 years running, national cup winners 2 years running. And the captain of the French team played in this club, and I knew him very well, Michel Ledos. And at the 75 international games in Stoke Mandeville, he was reclassified from a 3 to a 2. It should never been done. Another player was reclassified in the French team from a 3 to a 2, and one who should have been a 2 was classified as a 1. Well, if you then have got probably 2 3s, real 3s as the system allows for, and 2 2s who are 3s, and the 1 who's a 2, you've got 14 points on court. I think that works out that way, yeah. And so you've got a massive physical advantage over any other team. And that's how it was with several teams at the time. And that's one of the reasons why Great Britain, only one of the reasons why Great Britain did not perform as well in the late 70s and early 80s. So I was still playing, I came back to play for Great Britain, and in 1982, during that time, a doctor of sports science from Germany called Horst Strohkendel came up with a new system, which he'd devised based on discussions with players in Germany. Brilliant system. That system's still, by and large, well, no, it is. It's still the system that's used today in 2013. But he couldn't get it accepted by the authorities at Stoke Mandeville. Don't forget that Sir Ludwig Gutmann was still president of all he surveyed, and the reason was that he was only a doctor of sports science, and that did not cut the mustard with medical doctors at Stoke Mandeville. So we've been talking about the totally unfair system for years at Stoke Mandeville. I'm talking about maybe from 74. At each international games, it was the only thing that was discussed. This is unfair. And more players who were true, for example, 1-point players, were going out to the game because they couldn't compete with the 2s who were becoming 1s. And the only way a real 2 could compete when 3s were coming in to be 2s was if a 2 could become a 1. There were 4 classes, 4 points. And there was a clear differentiation between leg movement, which was permissible in different amounts for the 3s and 4s, and no leg movement for 2s and 1s. And so you had this massive differentiation, which wasn't required. And then the difference between the 1 and the 2 was that you didn't have any stomach muscles or lower back muscles if you were a 1, and you did have if you were a 2. And the difference between the 3s and the 4s was all to do with, based on the sport, a 3 basically can rebound with 2 hands, but only above the head. But a 4 that has at least good leg movement in one leg can rebound strongly. I mean, I'm leaning back against the back of my chair. A 3 or a 4 probably wouldn't have much of a back in the chair because they didn't need it. But a 4 can rebound strongly to one side. We come to the 1982 European Championships in Sweden. I had breakfast with the man who was then chairing the basketball section of the International Stoke Mandeville Games Federation. What a mouthful that is. Stan Lavanovich, a great guy, an American, who really had wheelchair basketball in his DNA. And we'd had a situation talking about these 3s, 2s and 1s, where the Americans at the international games A guy called Dave Efferson was one of their great players. But they said, and I believe this, that it was an administrative error. They put him down as a class 3 for athletics, which made him a 1, whereas he should have been a 3-pointer. So he wasn't even going from a 3 to a 2, he'd gone to a 1. And I'd been out with Jerry and him, and we'd been to the pub. And this guy didn't know how to get his chair up a curb, because he never used his chair except when he was on court playing wheelchair basketball. So I'm going through this at breakfast with Stan. There's only the two of us, and it nearly comes to blows, because I'd use an American player as an example. I wasn't saying he was a cheat, but he'd been put in the wrong class. And I said, this can't go on. To his great credit, Stan Labanovich set up a classification committee with Horst Strohkendel as its chair, and invited me to be a member. And from that moment on, it was decided in '82 that at the World Championships in Canada in '83, the new system would be brought in. And this guy was determined to do it, Stan Labanovich. Horst Strohkendel, it was his system, and I was determined to get it through. So we reclassified everybody at the World Championships in '83 for its implementation to be put in at the Paralympic Games in 1984. And this created, holy hell was let loose, you know, that what's all this going on? But I was the one, Strohkendel couldn't get it in, but I was the one that forced it through, and with the agreement of Stan Labanovich. So that was the new system coming in. Very well accepted by the people who needed it, which were the players who, many of whom had disappeared under the old system, but not liked at all by the players who then started to realise, if they hadn't done before, that they were in the wrong class in the old system. And we had one guy, I won't say what nationality he was, when he was reclassified in '83, when he was playing for his country at the World Championships with the old system, said, well, if I'm now a 4, and he was obviously a 2 in the old system, then I've got nothing else to do only to walk the dog, which he shouldn't have been able to do as a two, or go fishing. In the new system, we had a points limit of 13 points, which, if you do the maths then, if you had 5 4s on court, it'd be 20. So it was really bringing things back to giving every player, whether you're 1, 2, 3 or 4, a good chance to compete. Every country at the meeting at Stoke Mandeville in '84 of the Basketball Nations voted for it. And then, when the Israeli team realised how it would affect their performance, they then, at the end of the pool matches, there was another meeting, and they voted against it there. And we're already halfway through the Paralympic Games competition, and got then all the medical doctors of the Stoke Mandeville organisation that were above the basketball section to agree to that. And we didn't play with the new system, I don't think, for the second half of the event. But I knew from that moment that we could not have this happening again, that we couldn't have some more senior body. Of course, Sir Ludwig Gutmann wasn't alive then, but still the people that had succeeded him were very much of the same attitude. We are in charge and you have to follow, and we weren't having any of that. And in '87 at the International Games, the medical doctors insisted that the basketball players still had to have a medical examination, so they had a classification in the old system, because that was still the overall general way of classifying was still happening in all the other sports. And the American women's team refused, which of course caused a right rumpus, and said, look, he said, if we're basketball players, we have our new system from '84, we don't need this other system, and we're not competing in any other sports. And so at the end of the day, Stoke Mandeville had to pull back on that, and that was the end basically of their domination for no apparently good reason of what was good for sport, in my view. And so we did what was good for the sport as we viewed it. And of course that was me anyway, you know, with the greatest of respect, and I have a great respect for Sir Ludwig Guttmann now, when I realised just what he did and how he had to fight to get rehabilitation into the British medical system, you know, and that we weren't allowed to die after 3 or 4 months if you had a spinal injury. It's amazing what he did, but maybe it was because of his age, or maybe he didn't understand, or he would understand because he was a clever bloke, but where the sport, wheelchair sport and then Paralympic sport was moving to, and it had to get more competent. I hate that word, professional, but more competent.